Hello, I'd like to show you some examples of phishing, which is email scams, email frauds, where scammers are trying to obtain your personal information, particularly your username and password for accounts. They'd certainly be interested in credit card numbers. Phishing scammers will pretend to be trustworthy companies trying to trick you into giving over this type of personal information. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Here's an example of an email that is pretending to tell me that someone signed into my Google account, and they're trying to use official looking language and images to do that. Here's another sort of similar example. This is a technique that scammers used to use, where they would suggest to you that your account or your password had a problem, and they want you to click that button. Now, when I put my mouse over that button and if I go ahead and click it, it might bring me to a screen that the scammers have created, where they want me to type in my password, and it might look like a Google login or something. But the reality is that they've actually created a fake login page, and if I type my password in there and then I click that button, I'm basically just sending my password to the scammers. So that's a phishing technique that some people have used in the past. It's one to just be aware of. It also pertains to other companies besides Google. People pretend to be coming from Microsoft with a very sort of similar technique, just using the Microsoft name instead of the Google name. They do what's called spoofing an email address, where they can make the email address look as if it's coming from that company. But again, it's a phishing scam. Now, here's an example of an email I got, which is actually looking like it's coming from Google Photos. Now, I do know this person, and I was expecting to get this. And one strategy I use to see if I click this button, is it gonna be bad, is that when you hover your mouse over a hyperlink or over a button, down here on the bottom, it shows you the URL of where that button or link is going to take you. And in this case, I know it's hard to read, but it says photos.google.com, which is in fact Google's real domain. And so when I'm looking at that address, I know that that's an okay place to go, because it's really a Google address. And again, this is something I was expecting, so that was a legitimate example. Here is an example of getting an email with an attachment on it. And this attachment is dangerous because attachments can have programs that install on your computer and install what's called malware. They can do things like capture your keystrokes and send them back to the scammer's computer. They can do other things where they can gather and steal your information. So attachments are another common way that malware gets on computers. And so you have to ask yourself, when you get an email with an attachment, like, was I expecting this? Does this make sense to me? It's another phishing fraud. Here's an example of another type of attachment. This one is a Microsoft Word attachment. And again, here we're seeing that the email address that they're sending from has been spoofed. This is actually a company I used to work for, BBNS. And in this case, the scammers have crafted the email to look as if it's coming from BBNS, but in reality, it's not. And again, this is an attachment which has a virus in it. If my Microsoft Word program is out of date, then opening this attachment is going to probably give me a virus, give my computer a virus, which can steal my information. So another phishing fraud. As I mentioned, the scammers will try to craft their messages to look very official. They will actually steal the logos of certain institutions and use the exact type of email format that the real company uses. They can look at real mail messages and then create their fake ones to look very similar. In this case, one of the clues that this is a fake thing is that although it does say Bank of America, it doesn't say bankofamerica.com. It's Bank of America and then it's ending .aspx, which is actually a clue that this is a bogus message. It's not bankofamerica.com. So this is just another phishing example. And also notice it says, "Dear valued customer." Oftentimes, if it's the real bank, they're going to actually use your real name because they have systems that can put your real name in there. It doesn't necessarily mean it would be legitimate if it was your real name, but saying "dear valued customer" is not something that these banks typically will do. So that was another phishing scam. Apple is also another company that often gets taken advantage of by the scammers, where they try to trick people by sending alerts about your Apple ID. And again, that as you get a message like this, one strategy is to hover, don't click, just hover and see if that's going to take you to an apple.com address or not. Here we can see that they actually have put my real name. So this scammer was actually smart enough to be able to import my real name and address into their email strategy. But this is, in fact, another example of phishing. So again, I want to mention that when you get a hyperlinked thing and you mouse over it, down in the bottom, it shows you where that link is going to go. And so in this case, it's going to a pretty obscure web address. And for me, this was a clue that this message was actually just trying to trick me. Because if it were a real Google Drive file, it would be going to a google.com, not some other weird website. Now, another thing about this particular message is that it's actually coming from a friend of mine's email account. I happen to know this is one of my friend's email addresses. So what happened in this case is my friend fell for a scam. My friend put in her password someplace, and now the scammers got her account, and then what they do is they send their scam to everybody in her address book. So that's why I'm getting this message that looks like it's coming from my friend, because I'm in my friend's address book, and the scammers are using her address book to make the scam go further. But again, this is another phishing example. Google Drive, sharing Google Drive files is a common way that people have tried to do phishing. And in this case, they're stealing the Google Drive, one of the Google logos, and they're putting attachments on here. But this is actually not the way a real Google Drive file looks when it's shared. Here's an example of a real message when Google Drive is sharing a file with you. And again, in this case, what I'm going to do is hover over the link and make sure it's a google.com address. Here's something coming from DocuSign. This is another company that people use for signing documents. But this is a scam. It's not real. In this case, I knew that I hadn't signed any documents recently. It didn't really make any sense to me, like why I would be getting this. And so I use that as a method to know that it's just a scam. On the other hand, if you have just recently signed up for something or just done something online with a company, then you would be expecting a message. So here's an example that I had signed up for a Comcast account. So when I got this message, I was like, well, yeah, that's probably okay, because I just did sign up for Comcast. And when I hovered over the link, it led me to a Comcast.com address. So that was a legit message. Another company that gets used for fraud frequently is Netflix. These streaming services can be the same type of thing happens where they steal the logo and they create a message that looks like it might be coming from that. but when I hover over this, I'm not being led to a Netflix address, and so it's another scam. Something else that the scammers will do is they'll put up pop-ups on your screen. They can make your screen have a full pop-up warning, something that looks like this. It's sort of very scary. And then they are suggesting that they want to fix it for you. So here's another example where they will put a phone number on the pop-up, and they're telling us, I realize you can't read it, it says a serious malfunction has been detected with OS X, and then they want you to call this phone number. Here's another example of them sort of pushing pop-ups on your screen and telling you to call a phone number. The problem is that if you call one of these phone numbers, you're actually talking to the scammer, and one of the strategies they'll use is to try to offer to fix it for you. They want to connect to your computer and take over your computer, but don't let them do that, because then they can install malware and they can steal your information if you let them do that. So far we've been looking mostly just at computers and emails coming in on a computer, but your mobile device can also be similarly affected. And so, for example, here's an example of a pop-up on a phone, which is pretending to warn you that something's wrong, when in reality they're just wanting you to click on a link, which will in fact be what infects you. So another example of just getting a message on a phone in your email that has a attachment that's potentially has a virus or malware in it. And I want to reemphasize that one of the ways to protect yourself is to be careful not to click on things. Think before you click. Think to yourself, why am I getting this message? Do I know this person? Does it make sense that this person would be sending me a message like this? Do I recognize it? And when you're suspicious at all, then stop and look for clues. Don't just click on things. You can also get those same type of fraudulent things where the people have created a page that looks like it belongs to a legitimate company. This looks like a Google page, but in fact, this is not a Google account. It's a very well-engineered phishing attack where they've crafted a page that looks very similar to Google, but in fact it's not Google. This URL begins with a very odd string. It starts off with data:text, and that's the clue here. It's not starting with the google.com, it's starting with data:text. You know that things should be starting off with HTTPS and then google.com, not with some weird type of URL. Another place where we see scams and we see people trying to trick us is with voice calls, and so we can listen to an example of that here.
Your answer. Currently, I am in charge of your proceeding case and the deployment 003F9. You should reach us as soon as possible for further proceedings. Kindly call us back at 60938-4769.
So you're getting this voice message where they're saying, oh, you need to call us back at this number. Sometimes they pretend to be from the IRS or Social Security. And again, you need to be skeptical and not use the numbers that they're sending you. If you need to get back to somebody, what you need to do is go look up the real website of the company, find a phone number yourself. Don't use the numbers that people are popping up on your screens or putting in your voice messages. One of the things I like to talk about are the risks to you when or if your account were to get compromised. So certainly if somebody got your password for your email account, they can read every email that you have saved in your account. They can send email from your account and trick your contacts into getting the same type of scam. It's very easy to search email. When you're in your email, there's a search box and you could search for anything in there. They'll search for the word password to see if you've gotten any emails that have your password in it. If your same account credentials are used for other sites and services, if they get your password on one site and you use that same password elsewhere, then they can get into those other places also. Also, your email is often used when you need to reset a password at another site. So if someone has access to your email, then they might be able to go to your bank and request a password reset at your bank that comes to your email. But because they're in your email, then all of a sudden they've got access to your bank. So there are some significant risks even allowing somebody, or if your email were to get compromised. So I talked about some of the ways to spot phishing scams. And here's a list of some of those things. So if the message is asking you to send back personal information, like please send me your password or send me your social security number, your credit card number, that's a red flag. You should never send passwords back over email. Should never send your credit card number over email. It's not a safe way to transmit that information. And I remember I talked about having you stop and think, are you expecting this message or this document? Does it make sense to you? Is this something you had talked to somebody about, you knew they were going to send it to you? If the answer to that is no, then be skeptical. Don't just reply. Does the offer seem too good to be real? Like, are they offering you all kinds of bonus rewards or cash or something if you take some action? Well, if it's too good to be real, it probably is, because that's one of the tactics they use, is that they'll try to trick you into gaining access to your money by suggesting that you're going to get something from them. We talked about how at the beginning of the message that if it just says "Dear valued customer, to whom it may concern," that's not the way a lot of these companies would actually do business if it was legitimate. Like when it's Amazon, when it's your bank, they will typically have your name at the top of the email because they know who you are. If the message you're getting or the thing that you're looking at makes you feel suspicious, trust your instincts. Go with your gut. Stop and don't proceed. Don't click on things. Don't take action. Again, you can go and look up the information elsewhere if you need to get back in touch with the company. The other thing is phishing scams will often have what's called a call to action. They want you to do something immediately. Do it right away. That's one of the red flags of phishing. So you have to be careful of attachments, and you should not install things on your computer or let programs run, because that's how malware and viruses can get onto your computer. We talked about hovering over links, that if you get a link in a message and you hover your mouse over it, the link, it will show you in the bottom of your screen where that link is going to go if you're on a computer. And if the URL doesn't match up with what you're expecting, then you definitely don't want to go forward. It should be a domain name you recognize, like google.com or the name of your bank.com or netflix.com. It shouldn't be some weird or odd website. So websites begin with HTTP, and if they're secure, they have the S. The HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and when it's secure, it has the S at the end of it. Every Google and financial institution, banks, they're always going to be HTTPS because they've built the security into their sites. If you're at a site that just says HTTP, that means your information is not being sent securely. It's being sent in clear text over the web, and people have ways to steal that. So you want to look for HTTPS to know you're at a secure place to log in and or access your information. So we had some questions. One of the questions was, will I have a problem just from opening up an email message? And generally, you'll be okay. It's more often when you click on a link or open an attachment that you put yourself at more risk. Now, that being said, if your computer system or your operating system of your mobile device or your software is not up to date, in other words, if you've got old software running on your system, you are at some risk, even from just opening up an email message. So this points out the importance of keeping your operating system software up to date, keeping your applications like your Microsoft Word or your other applications patched with the latest releases from Microsoft. Because if you have old software, old applications, you actually could be at risk just opening up an email. But assuming that you keep your system up to date, then generally you're not going to put yourself at much risk just by opening a message. It would be when you're clicking on a link or clicking on an attachment that you put yourself at a real risk. We talked about, and there was a question about, like, if you get a message and the phone number on the screen, how do you proceed? And we talked about the importance of not using that phone number, not replying to that email address, but go and look up the organization yourself. So let's say you got a message from Netflix saying your account needed some attention, and please call this phone number. Don't use a number that you get in the message. Go to a different web window, look up Netflix customer support phone number, and use that phone number. And again, the same would hold true for Amazon or your bank or whatever it is, that you'd want to go search that organization yourself, go to their customer support, customer service page of part of their site to find their phone number or their email address, which will actually be a legitimate phone number, a legitimate address. We had a question about, is it possible to get a phishing message from a friend's account? And as I showed in one of my earlier slides, it sure is. You can, your friends can get compromised, and then the scammer can take over their account and send messages from their account. So that's definitely possible. So how do you protect yourself? Well, having good passwords is the first step. And then not using the same password on every single site, because again, if your password on one site gets compromised, you don't want the same password to allow the person to get into some other site. You don't want to store or write down all your passwords in a file on your computer, because if somebody got in your computer, they'd have all those passwords. So there are ways to safely store your password on a computer. It's called a password manager. Or the web browser, the Chrome browser, can store your passwords if it's your own computer. Now you wouldn't want to do this on a shared computer. You wouldn't want to let the web browser save your password on a shared computer. But if it's your own computer and the web browser and Chrome offers to save it for you, then that's a good way to allow yourself to set up and have the password saved for you, which then makes it much easier to use different passwords on every different site that you log into. And I would just say, at a minimum, don't use your email password for any sites that have to do with your finances. Like if you log into the Social Security Administration site or you log into a bank website, make sure you use a different password, a stronger password, so that anything that has to do with your financial information is protected with a different password. We talked about the importance of keeping your computer system and software up to date already. And never just let software run and install things on your computer, because that can install the viruses that can create real problems for you. There's something called multi-factor authentication, which we'll talk about another time. It's also called two-step login. This is a little more complicated topic, but we'll hopefully have time to come back to that. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure showing you these slides and working with you, and I hope you can stay safe out there on the internet.